Before we start this episode, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the current events our nation is facing. Since the recording of this episode last month, 2020 has only continued to uncover pain in our nation. We've had no shortage of examples of hate and racism in recent weeks, with the murder of people such as George Floyd, and although racism isn't a theme we explore to much extent in this particular episode, we want to take a moment to show our solidarity to our brothers and sisters across the country who live under the fear of these realities on a daily basis. Although the climate of our culture will always continue to shift week by week, whether the matter at hand is coronavirus, racism, or any other number of things, we hope whenever this episode finds you, whether you're listening near its launch now in mid-June 2020, or even years down the road, that these stories, themes, and lessons will be of value and encouragement to your life. We're Kyler and Cody McCormick, two brothers on a journey to pave our own path while chasing our passion.
While building our adventure filmmaking brand, The Outbound Life, we've become sponsored by some of the top brands in the film and travel industries, acquired Fortune 500 clients, and have spoken on stages all across the country sharing our story.
We now invite you along on our journey as we sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creators, and diverse thought leaders to discuss how to live a life we consider outbound, a life where you believe your story matters and live beyond your limits.
Come along and live the outbound life.
All right, guys. Well, here we are, and this is Kyler and Cody here. And guys, a podcast is something we've been talking about for so many years. And, this journey has just taken us in so many different directions that we've gotten to meet and learn from really incredible people in no specific category, right? There's been filmmakers and music producers and entrepreneurs and all these kind of wild people that we've always kind of been talking about. Wow, like the things we've been learning, we really want to share that with the world. And right now we're all on lockdown. People are in their basements, and, Cody and I have been working remote for about a month here, and we figured, hey, if not now, then never. So, our first ever guest here, we're really excited about. It's Arabian Prince. And guys, Arabian is somebody that, out of everybody we've met, you cannot fit this man in a box. Okay, when you try to describe him, he's going to go experiment in another direction, and he's a nuanced character. So I'll start by sharing a bit of a bio with you. So Arabian is a songwriter, rapper, producer, DJ, technologist, pro gamer, and futurist, among a lot of other things, but is best known for his part in pioneering hip-hop as a founding member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted rap group N.W.A. Beyond this, he produced the Grammy-nominated #1 hit song Supersonic, which you may have most recently heard in the trailer of the new Jim Carrey movie Sonic the Hedgehog. He's the founder of Innovate Next Open Labs and president of LAFTC, the Los Angeles First Tech Challenge Robotics Competition. Arabian, thanks for being here with us.
Happy to be here. I ain't got nothing else to do.
We're so stoked to chat with you, catch up with you, kind of learn a little about what lockdown looks like for you. And as Kyler and I were thinking back on just the history that we have with you, I think we met 6 years ago now. It was back, we were doing a shoot with a tech company out in the Bay Area. It was like a VR shoot in conjunction with Reebok and some MMA fighters. And that was like the start of Kyler and my career, like 6 years ago. That was probably the first year that Kyler and I were starting to take on paid jobs and traveling and, jumping into this world of content creating and storytelling. And I'll never forget, we on that shoot, we got to sit down with you and spend the day basically with you. We were filming a behind the scenes piece for that specific project, but through that, you were hanging out with us. We got to hear your story. And it kind of just blew us away, truly. And you grew up in a town, Compton, which is, a place that's known for kind of being on the rougher side of town in Los Angeles. How did you go from being a kid in Compton to becoming this leading innovator in the tech and music space?
Well, I have to give, shouts out to my mom because I'm an only child, and she did her best to keep me out of trouble and keep me out of all the other stuff that was going on in Compton. So first thing she did was put me in Catholic school. Well, that actually had an adverse effect because two things. One, in Catholic school, the nuns and the priest didn't really know what was going on. They weren't hip and cool. So you could get away with a lot of stuff in Catholic school that you couldn't in public school because all the teachers knew what was going on. So
Gotcha.
we were probably worse than most of the people in public school. But the other thing was, which she didn't know, and I never really told her, is walking home from school wearing like salt and pepper corduroy pants, a green sweater, and a red tie. That ain't a good look trying to get back to the hood, So I was always getting harassed, me and my boys, and then we had to fight. So we actually got tough because of that, you know what I mean? And so that was that thing. And then I had crazy uncles and cousins who actually caused most of the problems in the neighborhoods at the time.
Gotcha.
And they didn't want me to be like them. They were like, you don't do what we do. I'm like, well, you guys are doing it. But no, you don't do what we do. And if you do, then you got to deal with us. And I was more scared of my uncles and cousins than anybody on the street. So
it was almost like having that proximity to like both sides, right? You kind of get to understand the whole ecosystem there, and then having a lot of people involved in some of the rougher stuff going on in that area. They were wanting to keep you out because they didn't want you to get sucked in and see what, happens to kind of life trajectory and whatnot.
Yeah, and not only they didn't want me to see it, like I got to see it firsthand. I remember, I'm a little kid riding with my grandmother, and I see my uncle stumbling down the street, and he's got a freaking knife stuck in his head.
Wow.
Like literally,
wow.
Somebody stabbed him in the head with a knife. I never seen that light. He's bleeding all over the place, and my other cousin got shot, and you start seeing all of this stuff, and you're like, I don't want to do that, And so what ended up happening is they all got sent away to the military. And when they got sent away to the military, they, were reformed. They learned better in the military. And when they would come home from overseas, this was like the maybe late 70s. Yeah, late 70s, I would think. And they would be coming home with like synthesizers and ham radios and electronics, a lot of things that in the inner city, in the hood, you couldn't get. Little kids never seen nothing like that. But here I am in the house playing with all this stuff. And that turned me into like this mad scientist. So now I know how to use synthesizers at like 6, 7 years old, 8 years old. I know how to, talk on a ham radio and do all these things. And it just opened my mind, man. And from there, that was the beginning of it all.
So let's talk about that, right? So it's like you kind of describe the context of where you're coming from and, different family figures, and you start getting your hands on technology. All these different forms of ways of creating. I want to talk about, like, do you have like a first memory of one of your first ever projects, whatever that was? I know very young you got into coding and you got into DJing and producing all these different things, but what was like the first memory of something cool you made?
So I remember when I was maybe 12 or 13, I was playing football. I really love football. I was really good at football, Pop Warner. And my mother was a piano teacher, and she worked at Rockwell. And I don't even think it was Rockwell back then. It was like one of the aerospace companies. And my father wrote books. And so I had all these influences, and they wouldn't really let me go outside much, because I'm an only child, and it was crazy in the neighborhood. So I would stay in a house and just talk on a CB radio, because I talked them into buying me a CB radio, because my uncles all had them.
Nice.
And saved up my money. I got my little allowance. I never spent it. And I ended up having them buy me a CB radio antenna and put on the roof of our house. So I had like a huge base station. I was talking to truckers and other people in the neighborhood. This was during that big boom.
Yeah.
And from there, I got interested in music because my father at the time was had a talk radio show at a radio station called KACE. And I would go down there and just hang out in the control room. And while he was on the radio show, I was playing with the music. I was making little mixtapes and taking them to school and selling them for lunch money. And so I became a DJ at about maybe 14 years old. I started.
And what decade is this? Just kind of set the table a little bit for us with the whole music.
This would be, so I graduated high school in 83. So this had to be maybe 79.
Okay.
I started DJing. And the funny thing was I didn't have equipment, so I only learned how to do it at the radio station and didn't have enough money to get gear. And one of my buddies from my football team, his name was Termite, Derek Armelin. And he was real short, so we called him Termite. And we got together, and I talked my parents into buying me one turntable. He talked his parents into buying him another turntable. We shared a mixer, and we got wood and built our own speakers and built our own little thing, So that was our first little foray into, being entrepreneurs, I guess.
So that was like the resourcefulness that you had to dip into to really get yourself off the ground. And I think what's interesting is like, what we know of your stories, we have seen how you seem to like problem solve as you go. And a lot of times it's that self-drive that gets you past the limits that you're facing. Because I think that's very similar. I think Kyler and I can relate to that I would definitely consider both of us to be pretty self-driven. So it's like when I have friends that like don't have that same self-drive, I just don't understand it. Yeah. But through that, I've been having to understand more of where different people are coming from. Because like for me, I don't really have free time. When I have free time, I have a list of 15 things that I want, projects that I want to do for myself, things that I'm really excited about. And the matter of fact is just not everybody has that. So how like you being one of those self-driven people, how do you help instruct those that might not have that to kind of push through those kinds of barriers?
Like I said, I just had the hunger.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the only child. And I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't allowed to go out as much as other kids because I didn't have brothers or sisters to tag along with. And it was just me. And so I had to figure things out. I was like, well, what can I do since I'm sitting here? What can I get into? And I got into a lot of things. And I was always trying to figure out how something worked. Like I was always taking stuff apart too. Like I took apart my CD radio and made it better. Don't ask me how. I just started turning little saw screws inside. I'm like, oh, okay, looks interesting. And then turn that. Oh, that's like frequency. Okay. Oh, that's for more, I think 5 watts at the time was all that you were supposed to be allowed to broadcast with. Mm-hmm. But, people were buying like amplifiers and amplifying their CD radios. And there was this guy who I idolized in my neighborhood. And I never forget this. They called him the Green Lizard. And he had a really deep voice. I've never met him in person. But all I knew is he had, in my vision of my mind as a little kid, he must have had like this broadcast station at his house, because whenever he would talk on the radio, on the CD radio, he would bleed over like 17 channels. And anytime someone would make him mad, he would hit some switches. You could hear him hitting switches, and all of a sudden, just no one could talk because he was just so powerful. So I wanted to be that powerful. So I think just looking at other people and just trying to understand how to be the best at something. And that was part of it.
So it's kind of like looking for specific maybe role models or people that inspire you.
Yeah.
Is something that really helped you.
Yeah. And it wasn't like they didn't have to be in what I wanted them to be into, because, like I said, become a DJ. My father wasn't a DJ. Yeah. I just happened to be in a place with gear, and I'm like, ooh, I can figure this out. I always wanted to figure something out.
So I want to talk about kind of how this evolution then progressed, because it's interesting looking at you. There's multiple sides to you. One of the obvious sides is that you have a very mechanical mind. You're trying to figure out what are the underlying pieces that create things. So you're tearing things apart, you're innovating, you're creating, and then on the other side, you're an artist as well. So like back then, you were recording records, you were DJing, you were experimenting in all those different things. Let's talk about how those pieces add up and eventually led to N.W.A. When did that enter the story?
So like I said, I was DJing, and actually became a really, really good DJ in the neighborhood, and was doing all the little elementary school dances, and then eventually started doing the high school dances. And I started to do a skating rink in Compton, and I bumped into Dr. Dre there. And he was just regular old Dr. Dre. He wasn't Dr. Dre now, it was a regular old Dr. Dre. And he was Dr. Dre. And I used to call myself DJ Prince at the time. And then I bumped into another cat, Unknown DJ, and another cat, Egyptian Lover. All these guys were ended up becoming big West Coast music guys, Yeah. We were all just DJs and just DJ'd at skating rinks and little parties and hung out. And it got to the point to where the same thing happened. Dre was part of something called the World Class Wrecking Crew. And they had their own little crew, and they had a little nightclub in Compton. But that was their thing. And I was friends with them. And then you had Egyptian Lover, and they had Uncle Jam's Army. That was another crew, and they had their own thing. And I would always hang out with everybody, but I wasn't really a part of either or any of the crews. And I'm like, well, I can do this. And I ended up talking a guy into letting me use this community center for a nightclub on the weekends, like a teen club. And I started a club called The Cave in Lenox when I was about, I think, 16, 17 years old. And it became like a big hit, started making a lot of money. And what happened was, this was maybe 81, 82. And rap had just started bubbling up on the East Coast and on the West Coast, like early rap. And I started seeing some of my friends saying that they were going to make a record. So Egyptian Lover and Uncle Jam's Army, they made a record. The World Class Wrecking Crew, they made a record. Ice-T, he made a record. And I'm that guy, like, I can do that. So I figured it out. I walked into a recording studio with $500 and I made a record. And, the rest was history from that. And, still hanging out with Dre, and we all toured together. And then eventually we broke away from all of our little factions and started N.W.A.
That's just mind blowing to hear more of that backstory. So how did you take being a part of N.W.A. to like that experience? How did that then propel you into some of these different things? Like you still DJ, right? That's one of the things that you keep up with, and you're super passionate about. Like, I'll see different headlines every now and then with Arabian Prince or Professor X, right? Your Professor X as your stage name. Yeah. I'll see that headline. I'm like, oh, all right. He's rocking something else. It's cool to see that you keep up with that. So that transition, like, what was the next phase after N.W.A. for you? But first, a word about our sponsor. This podcast is sponsored by Rode Microphones, the Australian Pro audio powerhouse, making incredible gear for podcasters, vloggers, filmmakers, musicians, and audio engineers.
So the N.W.A. thing, I guess you would call it, we're in the Rock Hall of Fame. I left the group first because our manager I'll just be nice and say he wasn't treating us the way that he should have. Money wasn't flowing in the right direction. So I moved on to do my own thing. And it was actually a blessing in disguise because, it allowed me to get back to my own creative roots and create what I wanted to. And I'm this mad scientist. One of my first songs was called Strange Life, and my second or third song was called Innovator. So I've always been this innovative kind of, I call my Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory kind of guy that's like all over the place. And I got back to doing my own music, and then I really was into computers, because when I got my first royalty check when I was 16 for my first record, I went out and bought personal computers. And at that time, I have to tell kids this, or people who aren't as old as me, when you say, I went out and bought a computer today, that's not a big deal.
Right.
But in 1982 or 83, it's a huge deal because no one had computers. Matter of fact, you couldn't go to a store and just get it. There was maybe one or two stores. It was either Radio Shack or, I think at the time it was like Egghead Software. There was only like two places you can go get a computer. And I bought computers and learned how to program and learn how to do coding and animation just as a hobby because I was just interested in it. And gaming had just started. And I'm like, man, there's something about this video game thing. And I'm going to make this one mention. When we first started doing records and touring, everybody was partying and drinking and hanging out and smoking and doing all of this stuff. But the moment that like Coleco came out with ColecoVision and the handheld Coleco games, it changed that dynamic. You saw people not partying as much, but playing video games. And me being this young, hungry, want to make money entrepreneurial type was like, wait a minute, this is like the new crack. This is like the new
yeah, right. Opportunity.
Drug. How do I get into this? And that's what got me into computers.
So how do you stay on the cutting edge like that? Because, okay, so you set that stage really well of like building a computer at the time. That's expensive. That is not some small thing that everyone's doing. So few are doing it. And I think about where we are currently trying to think about current industries that are coming out that you're like, do I really want to drop 10 grand on the new thing that might go away, might not work well? Like, how do you muster up the courage to literally take this step into the field of, as you would call more like futurist, or like being on the cutting edge of innovation? How do you like take that big step?
Right. I just do it. Like, I mean, even to this day, like, we met at the event, the Reebok event, but, we bumped into each other. I think is at either CES or NAMM pretty much every year.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm there for. I'm at these technology conventions to find out what's next. My company's called Innovate Next. Like, I want to know what's next. I could give a crap about cell phones or computers or what's going on right now. I'm always looking to partner with, be a part of something that's going to change our lives and change our future. And that's what drives me. Like every day I'm buying some piece of gear or something just to figure it out and go, oh, okay. Like, I just bought like the craziest thing. So I bought a 3D printer when I was trying to figure out my M Classic product that I launched for gaming. And I got tired of having to try to deal with China back and forth for prototyping. So I'm like, well, I'll buy a 3D printer and do my own prototyping. Figured it out. And then I was like, okay, well, if I make product, then I need labels. Okay, how do I make labels? Oh, I can just buy my own vinyl cutter and make my own labels. And that's how I function. I want to understand it, figure it out, and then I can mass produce it and allow somebody else to do it. I'm just that guy.
Yeah, like very hands-on and figuring out as you go.
So I'm curious with that being said, because Arabian, like you touched on, we've over, who knows how many years, most years we've bumped into each other at NAB, National Association of Broadcasters. For people at home, it's a big film and broadcasting convention. But I feel like each time we see you, you're working on something new. Last year when we saw you, I think you were talking about M Classic, which it's big in gaming, and from our little understanding seems to help you up-res, convert let's say old video games into a higher resolution version with just plugging something into their console. What are some things you're working on right now?
So that was a hit, and that selling, that's doing well. I'm very happy to be a part of that. But I'm always, like I said, looking for that next thing. So, I've recently decided in dabbling around in this whole gaming and esport thing that I think I want to do more for this esport thing. And I really respect gaming because I've been doing gaming stuff for, over 30 years now. And one thing I found in buying a lot of product from other companies, like peripherals, mice, keyboards, computers, all kind of things like that, is everybody touts their product as being better than another person's product. And, we have the better mouse, or we have the better keyboard, or we have the better this or better that. But when you find out at the end of the day, it's all being manufactured by the same companies in China. You know what I mean? It's like, and me and my buddies are always laughing. We've got this thing called FCF, fake carbon fiber. Like, oh, well, this is $300 because they put FCF on it. What's FCF? It's fake carbon fiber.
Nice.
Carbon fiber on it, make it look shiny or whatever, and they charge more money and they say it's better, it's going to make your gaming experience better. And I want to do something different. So I've launched a new company with a couple of partners, and we are actually going to make high-end pro gaming gear. Cool. I would say gear because we're working on a lot of different things. But my vision is this: when you watch a baseball player or a football player or a basketball player or a musician, like even in, musicians, the tools that a professional uses in his craft are much different than the stuff that you can just go and buy at the store as a consumer. Like, it may look like the same bat that, Trout is using, but it's not. So I want to actually create a higher standard of gaming gear for the pro level game player, because it actually is a sport now. And,
right.
And I'll say we demand better stuff, and somebody's got to make it and push that boundary. And I'm trying to do that.
That's interesting. Like what, with your initial description of that, what it makes me think about is just like this word innovation and how it can oftentimes probably be a shallow word and probably not true. Like maybe people are talking about new specs or new features, but whatever quote unquote innovation is happening, it's not really value innovation. I think that when it was like the iPod versus the Zune, Microsoft is, saying like, hey, here's all these specs. And I think on a sheet of paper, it probably looked pretty good, but like the iPod users were like, well, this is just like a simpler interface for me. I'm getting value from it as opposed to flashy things that maybe don't mean anything to me. So
yeah, you're right. And I think that too, and don't get me wrong, we live in a capitalistic society, right? And everybody wants to make money. I want to make money. I can buy more SpongeBob toys. Yeah. So, but for me, it's about give me value for what I'm spending. And I understand a company like an Apple or a company like a Microsoft or a company like all these other companies, they put out products and it's an incremental grade because, okay, iPhone 10X. Okay, we got this. Then iPhone 11 has a better camera, better this, but it's technically the same phone.
Sure.
And there's nothing that you as a consumer, honestly, like I buy every new phone that comes out. Don't get me wrong. I'm that dude. I need to have it, right? Yeah. If it's like, who got the fastest car? I do. Who got the fastest phone? Yeah. I do. Right. I may not even notice it, but I got it. It's that thing. But my point is, at some point, you got to go outside the box and make something better or make something different. Like if I can make a better mouse, if I can make a better keyboard, if I can make a better whatever, for gaming, that's going to really give a player an edge or not fail that player in a critical moment, like precision. I'm really wanting to get into precision. And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And that's what we're researching right now.
Well, that's interesting just with, the whole COVID epidemic or pandemic going on right now and gaming taking off so much. Like it's had such big growth right now. That so many different, amateurs are getting into the sport and so much more streaming is going on just with more time on people's hands. So one, I think that's quite an interesting industry to be pushing more into during this specific time. I'm curious on your side, literally back to the topic of, we're all on lockdown and this is going on. How has that impacted the industries that you have your hands on?
Well, actually, fortunately, gaming is doing quite well because all the people are playing. And, the gaming industry is booming. The music side, it's weird. It's slowed down on the touring, but you're seeing everybody building their fan bases online. Now, that doesn't actually add to money because a lot of my buddies are starving right now, like because they can't tour, they can't DJ, they can't make money like they would normally make when it was just freewheeling and going wherever you wanted to go. But I think what it's doing, it's waking up the Godzillas. Because there's a lot of people out there that I've said to, including myself, like I'm a very private person, more or less. I'm not a very braggadocious person. I can talk. I like talking, but I'm not the guy that's going to turn on my camera every day or go on social media every day and go like, oh, look what I'm doing.
Yeah. Right.
It's, I made this. Oh, I did this. Or, I'm not that guy. I need to be that guy. I need to. Everybody, especially when you're selling products, I got to learn that I need to do more of that. And what I mean by waking the Godzillas is there's people like me or some of my buddies who are geniuses and very brilliant and interact with people very well. They're just not narcissistic or braggadocious. So it's a little harder to get them going. But when you get hungry in this COVID thing and they can't leave the house, I'm starting to see them on social and I'm loving it.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's like forced innovation. Right. Yeah. Like most of life. Okay. And it's especially living, in the United States, things are pretty nice. Everyone lives pretty comfortable for the most part, and beyond that, it's like when just in general, when people live in a comfort zone, there's a natural inclination in just kind of chilling there and enjoying it. Like even the driven people, they still like that little comfy zone. Yeah. But when things just get thrown off, that's one of the cool things I think I've been seeing through all this. Obviously, there's so much hardship, and, you know, our hearts and prayers go out to the families of people that are affected, you know, through this. So much devastation is happening. But on the side of innovation, like literally people are being forced to innovate, or they're screwed. Like, you know, jobs are going away. Industries are literally changing. The music industry, these people can't perform. So, I mean, it's like, I think we're going to see so much innovation in such a condensed time because you have to figure it out, or you go by the wayside. Like, there is no coming back from this.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. So true. And I'm actually loving it, you know, because like I said, innovation comes from this, you know, and I when I speak at schools, when I speak around the world, I tell people this, especially the entrepreneur, the startup person. I always tell them, just because you set out to do that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. You may, you know, like, oh, I'm going to make this peanut butter pie thing, right? And I'm going to take some peanuts, I'm going to put them in this pan, and I'm going to roast them, and I'm going to make this pie. And like, oh, that didn't happen. And well, I'll just grind them up. Oh, what is this? Peanut butter. You know what I mean? It's like the weird thing where you go that way and you end up another direction. So you need to try things in order to create innovation and in order to innovate. And I think we get stagnant when things are working, when everything is smooth. That's what I mean. I think everything had to stop for a minute because people were taking everything for granted. And, you know, cell phones and tablets and computers, they make our life easier. Like, I talk to Google every single day. Me and Google are home. Like, I'm serious. Google is like my.
You're not alone. You've got Google with you, right? You having a conversation.
Because I'm really bad. Like, I put everything on my calendar, but if you don't look at your calendar, or I get so many reminders, if you don't look at the reminders, you still will miss your meetings. But Google will tell you vocally, and, you know, tell you, hey, you got this. So, you know, it's all about innovation, man. And I think that's where we're headed right now.
Right. I like this idea of awakening Godzillas right now, because you're totally right. I mean, sticky situations breed innovation. We've been doing things the same for so long. We're comfortable with doing that. It's not until your back is against the wall that you have to adapt or die. And, you know, we can see this throughout history. I mean, look at the Industrial Revolution, look at more recent advancements like, you know, streaming sites overtaking Blockbuster or forcing cable TV to adapt. You know, now, you know, Jimmy Fallon, whatever, people are consuming that on YouTube as much, if not more, than they're watching it on cable TV. So I'm like curious, like when you're looking at this ever changing landscape in this season with COVID, like what do you think are some of those shifts we're going to start seeing?
Well, the biggest shift I've seen is the interactive online resources and stuff like that. Like, you know, the Zoom calls.
Yeah.
What's the new app that just popped up? House Party. I have yet to be on House Party. Everybody's
I
haven't done it yet, and I got to get there. But, you know, I think, and then I can't remember the names. There's like 3 or 4. I'm actually on the board, or one of them. I can't remember the name right now. But startups that are allowing expression from artists, like go online and perform. Because, you know, what's happening right now, for the people that don't know, like DJs are trying to go online on Instagram and on Facebook and do a DJ set.
Right.
But unless you're a big DJ with a big name that's got sponsors, they're all getting shut down because they don't have the rights to reproduce and replay those songs. So
did you see the video with Shaq and his kids? Shaq DJing in his kitchen and they're having a ball.
Yeah. So they let that go, right?
Exactly.
But other DJs, they'll shut them down. And there have to be platforms. I'm hearing that there's a couple platforms brewing up that are allowing DJs to go out and perform for their fans and, you know, and do that. So I think that's going to happen. And I think the biggest thing, and I'm working with some companies on some stuff I really can't talk about on the COVID side of things, is when you get back out there into the public, how do we protect ourselves in the workplace? How do we protect ourselves in the stores and the malls and on public transportation and on airplanes? Like, we all travel a lot. Right. I miss, like, I was about to do a post, man. I've got so many freaking, I keep all of my lanyards and badges from all the conventions around the world. And it's like, I just look at them now like, that may never happen again.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So how do we change that? You know, what do we do?
Right. Well, that's one of the interesting things. Whenever you have something that impacts a nation, or right now the entire globe, it's like you have kind of these before and after moments. Like there was post 9/11, where now, you know, the American people in general were willing to give up basic, freedoms, you might call them, give up a little bit more information. Okay, I'll walk through the metal detector before I get on the airplane. I want that. You think about what a post-pandemic world looks like, because all these things that was so normal, half a year ago, concerts, sporting events, all these different things, I'm curious to see where people's psychology goes. I mean, one, how you recover economically from this, but two, like, are people going to be wanting to gather for these massive concerts again? Are we going to be, where's that ratio between we're in a streaming world right now? How much of that will remain, and what will the new normal look like?
Well, and you think about like the next generation, because it's the next generation, it's the high schoolers that are going to grow up to be, the new millennials, basically, right? And they're the ones that are going to become the next spending power, but they're growing up in this day and age. And obviously this is still quite a short period of time on the grand scheme of things, but they're starting to get used to, being away from people. And I think it's typically those younger people, at least on the tech side, that adapt so fast. And then, so I'm really curious about like what that next generation is going to do with this, which it makes me think of, you brought up the fact that you run Innovate Next, and it's this whole focus around empowering youth to get tech in their hands. I'm curious if you could kind of expound for people that don't know what Innovate Next is. Can you kind of share what that whole initiative is?
Yeah, definitely. It's basically, I want to create a whole bunch of me. You know what I mean? Like, I understand where I came from. I'm very humble about, my beginnings, and I really want to help kids, and not only kids, but inner city people who don't have access. And I think the people who do have access, they take it for granted that, oh, I've got this. I can get this anytime I want.
Yeah.
But when you go to some of these cities, they don't know most of these things exist in technology. They don't have access. So if you give them access, they will create. I got access. And because I came from somewhere else, the way I think about or thought about technology at the time when I was young was different than people who have access and take it for granted. So what I understand is, and I call it, just there's black gold and brown gold and all of this in these inner cities, because if you give them some tools, they're going to think about them in a different way, and it may create something new and something different than just the regular person who takes it for granted. So, and I understand that. So that's pretty much what Innovate Next Open Labs is creating a space that gives access to people who don't have that access, and actually seeing what comes out of that and funding it, saying, hey, that's a great idea. Let's do it.
Cool. So early on, you talked a little bit about, or actually, I kind of want to discuss a little bit of just kind of how this plays into the outbound life, because you've been someone that we've watched for years, be someone that lives the core values of what it is to live the outbound life, which is you believe your story matters. And because of that, you live beyond your limits. When you shared a little bit earlier about how your mom was a big influence and your cousins and all that, kind of pushing you into a safer direction, keeping you on more of a narrow path, basically. And then as you started exploring that, you saw that you literally had an impact on others. You in the music industry, things were coming out, things were, you were succeeding at what you were doing. And that really showed you that, like, you matter, your story matters. And then beyond that, I'm curious, with limits that you've had to overcome, obviously there were those limits back then, but what's a limit right now that maybe you're struggling with and you're still processing, because we can probably all count different limits that come into our life. But I think it's really important even to show people that have made it far, you still encounter these challenges.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I one thing that really pushes my button when it comes to just life and what's the word I'm looking for? And teaching or information or giving people knowledge is I believe that we're still in the ancient times when it comes to teaching. Like, we need to change how we teach in the school systems.
Yeah.
Honestly. And I love teachers. I love professors. I deal with them all the time. They invite me to their schools. And sometimes there was a school in San Diego called High Tech High. They invited me out to do a keynote. But what was interesting about this keynote, it wasn't to the students. And eventually they brought the students in, which was a crazy thing. It was a surprise. But it was for the teachers and the faculty for me to talk to them and tell them about my life and how I grew up, so that they understood that if you think outside the box a little with a young mind, maybe they'll create and do something great. You know what I mean? Instead of just pushing them through the system. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but it's kind of like knowledge is the key, and expanded knowledge, not just what's in the book or not just what's in the curriculum. I've always had not a problem because I believe in STEM and STEAM.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes when we talk about STEM and STEAM, it kind of puts everything in a box where it should be everything is tech. And that's my whole vision in life is everything is technology. Like, there's food tech, there's fashion tech, water is technology. And once you instill that into someone's mind, then they can go out and create.
Well, I think, and it's hard to build curriculum, everybody's unique in their own way. It's hard to build curriculum that's going to fit everybody in and really empower them in the best way that they can do. And obviously, it's like I have my own gripes and ways with the education system, but in a lot of ways, they've done some good stuff in trying to scale this up and get people educated. But there's a limit on that alone. And I think that's exactly kind of what you're talking about, which is like we have to figure out how to approach this differently. And I think as tech kind of continues to expand, I think it does empower much more information to get in the hands of every individual person. Obviously, in the information age, having so much information right at your fingertips on your phone. So kids these days, I think, get to explore a lot more than even 10, 15, 20 years ago, which is, it's going to be interesting to see how the education system does change and almost empower more of a focus on some of that free creativity instead of being so focused on just checking the boxes.
Yeah. And I think too, for me, and, I can't complain because the school system got me to where I am. I got a lot of my knowledge from school. I love school. I learned a lot, but I remember, I think I took like American history for like 10 years or something. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
American history forever. Like, you could teach American history in like a year, like the whole thing. But I know they just wanted this, gradual progression. But kids are so much smarter now. And they have so much information at their grasp, like immediately. Like, if you ask them a question, say, okay, go home and do homework. You know what they're going to do? They're going to go home and Google it and just write it down and come back.
Right.
So it's not the same as when I was growing up where you really had to figure it out. So if knowing that, what knowledge do you give them, and how do you let them proliferate and go out into the world and create what's new? That's what I'm scared about is everyone's very complacent and fewer people are creating. Now, everyone is creating a brand, but creating brands is much different than creating our future. So, we don't want to have 100 million people who have their own brand. We need some people to push the envelope. So.
Right. It's almost like, how do you teach? Because these are like fundamental tools underneath the classroom system. We're talking about creativity, curiosity, innovation. This is not just learning to answer a test question. It's learning to think, there's different ways of answering, many questions we have. There's different approaches. That's what innovation is. And when we're in a classroom where if you choose the wrong multiple choice answer, you get punished. I'm not learning how to problem solve. I'm not learning how to think for myself. So I just think that's an interesting conversation that we're certainly passionate about. It is how how do we expand this idea of the classroom? And that is not to step on traditional schooling by any means. It's saying, how could it extend beyond that? Which is why I think we're really inspired by what you're doing with like Innovate Next, for example. You're teaching kids how to create. If they can be their creative selves, they're going to start solving problems you didn't know existed.
Yeah, and solving them a lot sooner. You know what I mean? Because, one thing I noticed, did Mark Zuckerberg ever finish college? No.
Right.
Bill Gates, did he finish college? I don't think so. I think they all kind of like dropped out and like became billionaires. And I'm not saying don't go. Yeah. I'm saying that if you live your life trying to figure out what you want to do and you understand that you can do it a lot sooner, you can, go do it. Like if what you want to be is a photographer, there's knowledge out there right now for you to go be a photographer at 14, 15 years old.
Right.
As opposed to waiting, or you want to be a cinematographer, you want to, be a director of films. When I was at Loyola Marymount speaking to the film school, I was asking a lot of the kids to show me their reels, show me what you're working on. And some of them were like, well, I don't have anything yet because I'm waiting to get the cameras and waiting to get this. Yeah. I'm like, well, let me see your phone.
Yeah.
You got like the new 4K iPhone.
Exactly. Yeah.
You haven't done a movie? Like you should be doing shorts like every day. Wake up in the morning, do a movie short. Then they go, oh, I didn't think about that. I'm like, duh. So it's just pushing people a little bit, giving them little nudges to get them to where they need to be.
Yeah, no, and it's being it's not a spectator sport. The more involved people can be in that experimentation process, as opposed to being scared to fail, I think. Look, going into Cody and my story just a little bit is, I personally didn't actually go to college. I started taking online courses halfway through high school. And, I acknowledge I was, my parents could have said, that's not cool. You're going to stick in the system. And that's the case for the majority of people. So I acknowledge that was a real benefit. But during this time, I started looking at, if I could learn from any teacher in the world, what would this ideal classroom look like? Like, who are my big heroes? And I started finding ways to get in touch with these people, write them an email. Can I shadow? Can I be your coffee guy? Can I finding creative ways to build these relationships, and these relationships, being exposed to so many different brilliant minds, that started becoming my film school, started becoming my business school. Cody actually did online courses for his college, which he did so that he wouldn't go into debt for schooling. He did so that he can start a business when he was young. And that's really when we combined forces. But I think it's I'm always intrigued to see other people and how other ways of learning that maybe aren't so obvious.
Yeah. And I think just one note on that, I literally got to watch Kyler, my little brother, go from being someone that was down in school, feeling like a failure, like he literally wasn't going to measure up to anything, not become anything in life, to finding what he loved and getting so excited and coming alive. That was a huge change. And I think that's out there, that's available for anyone if they really find what they're like really curious about and really pursue it. So I think, I don't know, that just seeing some of those stories of people that truly expound into what they want to learn and then really keep chasing it, like doors open and things happen.
Right. Yeah, they do. And I was so impressed when I met you guys. And every time I see you, you guys have that drive. You guys know your craft, know what you want to do, and you're out there trying to go get it. And I think that's the key. And, I'm sure you're on YouTube looking at stuff just as much as I am, because I'm always looking at other, people out there that are trying to go get it, who've got just a little bit of information here and a little bit of information there, or what are you using and why do you use it? And why do you use that over this? And then I'll make my own decision on how I want to build or create. But, all the information is out there to do anything you want to do. You just got to have the drive to go do it.
Well, that's awesome. And Arabian, we just thank you so much for, jumping on and being a part of this. Like, your story really has inspired us over so many years. And that's why we thought it was important to try and share some of these stories with other people, because I think they can get inspiration from it. But even on that note, I want to make sure people can follow what you're doing, seeing what you're up to next. What's the best way for people to kind of follow you on the journey you're on?
All I got to do on my social is just OG Arabian Prince on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. It's Arabian Prince, or my secret name, Mick Lazan.
There's a secret key. Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, we'll include that in the notes of the podcast that anyone can follow along. But yeah, it's been such a pleasure, man. And as always, keep on keeping on. And I'm excited to see what's next, and we'll check in, in a while and see what's happening.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys, man, and be safe.
A few closing thoughts, guys. First, we're so grateful you took the time to listen today. It really means a lot to us to be able to share our journey with you. Second, if you got any value or inspiration from this episode, please take a minute to leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. Lastly, remember, your story matters. So go for it today and live the outbound life.